You're an adult now. Stop depending on your parents. You're only living here because you don't pay rent. Isn't it pathetic? We won't put up with it any longer. Leave immediately." Michael's voice was icy and cutting. "They label me as unemployed just because I work from home, a situation I didn't choose. They've put my mother in a nursing home, and I can't handle it anymore." Karen chuckled, her gaze lingering on me with an unsettling curiosity. I couldn't fathom what was so amusing. "My name is Rachel. Until recently, I enjoyed tranquil days at my parents' home. The warmth of family gatherings was always a source of comfort. But everything changed one day due to an accident. My mother now relies on a wheelchair to go outside and needs a walker to move around the house. Despite the hardship, I've always admired her resilience in accepting this new reality. My father, Richard, had always been the steadfast pillar of our family. Despite his advancing age, he remained unwaveringly dependable, especially in supporting my mother. That's why I chose to stay home all this time to assist them. But everything changed abruptly when my father suffered a fatal heart attack. From that moment, our home fell into an even deeper silence. In that oppressive quiet, I felt lost and unsure of how to move forward. The news of his sudden death was a staggering blow to our family. My mother, Linda, was overwhelmed with grief, her sorrow evident as she wept uncontrollably until the funeral. Watching her in such anguish was heart-wrenching. As the eldest daughter, I was expected to fulfill the role of chief mourner, though traditionally it is the eldest son, Stephen, who would take on this responsibility. He dismissed the duty with a casual, "Let Rachel handle it," and avoided the task altogether. On the day of the funeral, I was too consumed by my responsibilities to grieve openly until my father's cremation. It was only at the crematorium, faced with the harsh reality, that I allowed my tears to flow freely. Lisa, Stephen's wife, observed my tears with a cold gaze and said, "Aren't you ashamed of crying so much as an adult?" Michael echoed her sentiment, adding, "It's pitiful. I wish you'd compose yourself." Despite their harsh words, I took my mother's wheelchair and guided her to a quieter corner away from the crowd. We held hands, sharing stories of my father, his warm smile, and the cherished moments we spent together. In that intimate space, Linda and I resolved, from now on, it will be just the two of us. We'll combine our strengths and look forward together. After the funeral, Michael and Lisa departed without a word. I was surprised by their early departure, especially given the significance of our father's funeral. His sudden death had shifted the dynamics within our family. Stephen, in particular, seemed distant, but my mother reassured me, everyone grieves in their own way. Stephen might be mourning in his own way. I took her words to heart and tried to keep my emotions in check. After that, life settled into a quiet routine for my mother and me. I worked from home as a freelance programmer, though my parents never fully understood the nature of my job. They probably assumed I was working diligently, given my regular contributions to the household finances. Balancing my programming work with household chores and caring for my mother proved challenging. With my father gone, I now bore the brunt of managing the household and looking after my mother, all while maintaining my job. Adding to the strain was the debt my father had incurred as a co-signer for a friend who had disappeared, leaving us to face the financial burden. Even in retirement, my father had taken on part-time work to repay the debt, but with his passing, that responsibility fell to me. Every day was a struggle with debt collectors visiting monthly and the pressure of approaching repayment deadlines. Managing the house, working, and dealing with these financial obligations was more demanding than I had anticipated. Yet I was determined not to burden my mother with my stress. Despite my exhaustion, I made sure to remain cheerful and supportive around her. Each time Michael visited, it felt like all my efforts were undone. Though his home is about an hour's drive away, he made the trip occasionally to check on Mom. However, his visits always seemed to come with criticism of my work. Still fixated on that keyboard job, he would sneer at my commitment to freelancing. "I've told you before, I'm making a decent living as a freelancer. Whether you approve or not, I'm charting my own course." "Freelancing, honestly, just sounds like you're bragging," he would sarcastically remark. Michael was always seen as the ideal son, admired by everyone. Growing up, I was frequently compared to him, often just seen as Michael's sister. True to form, his visit began with petty criticism, but today he seemed to have something more serious to discuss with Mom. After a brief conversation, he quickly moved to her room. I was curious and discreetly watched what was unfolding. Inside, Michael, looking somewhat displeased, was expressing his concerns about my work. Isn't it because you've coddled Rachel that she hasn't taken on a proper job? Michael's voice was laced with clear dissatisfaction. Our mother, with a resigned expression, took a deep breath and replied, I may not fully understand the details of what Rachel does, but I believe she's chosen her own path and is giving it her best. If she's content with it, that's what matters to me. Michael's displeasure was evident. But isn't it partly your fault that Rachel's always stuck at home? For her sake, maybe it's time you consider moving to a senior living facility. At that moment, I felt a strong urge to defend my mother and assert my own choices. I chose freelancing for its flexibility and my passion for programming. Being able to support and spend time with my mother were important factors, but they were not the sole reasons. Without thinking, I opened the door and walked toward my mother, ready to confront the situation. I want you to know, Mom, that I didn't choose this path because of you. I chose this job because it's the right fit for me, I said firmly. Linda smiled, her eyes full of appreciation. I know you didn't choose this just for me, Rachel. Catching Michael's surprised expression out of the corner of my eye, I continued, I've never seen you as a burden, Mom. My mother responded by gently squeezing my hand, and in that moment, I felt our connection strengthen more than ever. Rachel, thank you. I'm deeply grateful for all the care you've given me, but I wish you could have more time for yourself. Her words made tears well up in my eyes. Rachel, you're an adult. You should be exploring the world beyond this house. There's no need to be confined here, Michael said, his tone stern yet tinged with concern. After escorting me out of the room, he started discussing moving our mother to a senior home. Before long, the decision was made for her to relocate. The house felt unbearably quiet and empty compared to the days when our family was together. When I visited Mom at the senior home, I found some relief in seeing her enjoy her new friendships. Still, I couldn't shake the frustration of Michael making such a significant decision without consulting me. One day, I received an unexpected call from Michael. Keep Sunday free, he ordered abruptly before hanging up. His overbearing attitude was becoming too much for me. On Sunday morning, Michael and his wife, Karen, showed up at my door. As soon as they entered my room, Michael made a surprising proposal. Don't you think this house is a bit too large for you, Rachel? Karen added with a smile. Actually, we're considering moving in here. Could you find somewhere else to stay? I was stunned and could only manage a stunned, what? Michael continued, you've been depending on our parents even as an adult. You stay here because you don't pay rent, and that's not acceptable. You need to move out. Karen stood beside him, wearing a smirk. A surge of emotions welled up inside me, but I managed to reply, fine, I'll move out. But from now on, stay out of my affairs. In response, Michael proposed, maybe it's time to sever our sibling ties. It could be a fresh start for both of us, don't you think? I nodded in agreement, saying, that sounds fine to me. Soon after, I began searching for a new place and quickly found an apartment that I liked. The move was swift since I didn't have much to pack. The new apartment was perfect for solo living, bright, well ventilated, and very comfortable. The pressure I felt in the large house back home gradually lifted in this new setting. To my surprise, I quickly found myself enjoying this new phase of my life. Even shopping at the nearby small supermarket became a pleasure. This fresh start brought new discoveries and a sense of hope. On a sunny day about a month later, I received an unexpected call from Michael, who had previously claimed we were no longer in contact. His voice carried an edge of urgency. Rachel, is it true that Dad left behind debts? It dawned on me that I hadn't informed Michael about the debts. For me, dealing with them had become a routine part of life, and I hadn't considered it noteworthy. Why didn't you mention this earlier? The whole neighborhood is buzzing with rumors. Karen's too scared to even go outside. How have you managed to keep those intimidating debt collectors at bay? Michael asked. I replied calmly, it's straightforward. I've been making the payments every month. Really? The collectors are saying the amount is $1,000 a month. How have you been able to cover that? Well, it was tight, but my freelance work was doing well, so I managed. I worked hard to balance both the debt repayments and our household expenses, I explained. Michael, on the other hand, had a steady job at a large company but hadn't seen much career advancement or salary increase. I suspected that my income might be higher than his, and it seemed I was correct. Michael sounded desperate. Honestly, $11,000 is a bit too much for me. Can you help me out? He pleaded. I responded coolly, recalling our previous agreement. Remember, we severed our sibling ties. You'll need to discuss this with Karen and handle your own finances. Without waiting for a reply, I ended the call. Michael's calls didn't stop, and I had a sinking feeling that something significant had happened. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I saw Michael and Karen, looking quite remorseful and holding a gift. Likely an apology. They had found my new address through Mom and had come over. I didn't open the door but spoke through the intercom. What brings you here? Tears welled up in Michael's eyes as he pleaded. I'm truly, deeply sorry. I don't have anyone else to turn to. Please help me. Karen stood beside him, her head bowed in apology. It was clear that Michael had made some poor investments and lost a substantial amount of money. Their plan had been to take over the family home, reduce living expenses, and use her father's inheritance to repay the debts. The entire scheme to move Mom to a nursing home and force me out of the house was Michael's idea. But instead of finding an inheritance, all they uncovered was a massive debt. I thought we'd be able to claim the house and pay off the debts with Dad's inheritance. I had no idea he left behind so much debt, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Remember, we agreed to sever our sibling ties. We're no longer family, I said coldly, dismissing them. If you continue to bother me, I'll have to involve the police. Their devastated expressions were evident, but their problems were no longer my concern. Later, while walking near my old home, I noticed that it was up for sale. Surprised, I spoke with a neighbor who mentioned ongoing disputes between Michael, Karen, and the debt collectors. It seemed they had vanished suddenly, likely due to their financial troubles. I hoped they found some measure of happiness wherever they ended up. Meanwhile, my own life was fulfilling. My work was busy and I enjoyed various delightful events, especially outings with friends from the tennis club and wonderful dates with a special someone I met there. I excitedly shared the news with Mom, saying, Mom, I've met someone. She beamed with happiness and said, as long as you're happy, I am too. Her words filled my heart with joy. I'd eagerly anticipate the future, walking alongside the person I've chosen to share my life with. The road ahead looks bright and full of promise.